We're back, studio. We talk, all the news now focus on Middle East and Gaza. For 3 weeks now, the Israelis' military machine been bombing and bombardments every day. People are trapped. 100,000 are now running in the street, don't know where to go, no safe place. About 600 Palestinians have been killed, about 30 Israelis been killed, and the whole media here in this country is covering the event as they are equal party, as if it is a war. It's not a war, it's a massacre, it's an atrocity. Gaza, Hamas do not have an army, do not have a navy. Protesters everywhere, but I haven't seen in the mainstream media any of a protest in this country, but there was one here in Minneapolis, and we have here one of the organizers, we have Meredith, Aby-Keirstead, and I know I messed up her last name, okay. Forgive me. She's an organizer of anti-war committee and war on Gaza. And as you welcome to BelAhdan first.
Thank you.
Very nice of you to come. I know you've been busy protesting. I know there is a lot of things to protest. I can't believe you actually have time for to just do your own things. But tell me, I'm probably the only one or local media that are covering this protest, and I know Bill Solomon is probably the only one who came and cover your protest. Tell me a little bit about your protest and the anti-war committee that you are, member of, and why the mainstream media are not covering the protests all over there is some other protests in the United States.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that there is a growing protest movement against U.S. military to Israel, and I think something that most Americans don't understand is not only what this conflict is about. Your average American thinks this conflict is about religion when it's really about land. But second of all, your average person has no idea that we're actually paying for the massacre that you were talking about in your introduction. Your average American doesn't understand we give $3 billion in U.S. military to Israel every year. And like last week on Friday, the Senate passed a unanimous resolution of support and also voted to send, several hundred, I think it was $600 more million to Israel as the ground invasion was happening. And so really we as American tax dollars have blood on our hands. And so that should be a reason for the media to want to cover, like, what are we actually paying for? But instead, there has been a relative, media silence on this issue in terms of, most of the papers locally have really, and the media coverage locally has been focused on AP stories, where they talk about the conflict, again, in this very one-sided way. They make it sound like this is an issue about Israel's self-defense, which I would argue, like you were talking about, it's not an issue of self-defense. If you look at the death toll, it's pretty lopsided, right? 600.
But nobody talks about the Palestinians' right for self-defense.
I agree with you.
I don't know, even Obama, we have a president who thought he is a different color, a different background, and he's going to give America a different look on this conflict. And still, in the same, specter, a political specter, they don't disagree on the fact Israel is, have the right to self-defense, and nobody even questions the intention and what Israel is doing.
Right, and I think that's the way that they framed this issue is they make it seem like the whole, context or the whole cause of this conflict was about the original 3 Israeli settler kids that were kidnapped and then murdered by some rogue Palestinians that might or might not have had some affiliation with Hamas, but Hamas has not claimed that action. And that was definitely, people, the media has been talking about that as this, reason for starting it, without talking about the fact that this was within a context of over 50 years of military occupation on the part of the Israelis, and not talking about the fact that some of these families have now fled their homes. Like, some of these children in Gaza, we're talking about 3 times within their 10-year lifespan. I mean, that context piece is really missing. And it's like what you're talking about. They make it seem like it's these 2 equal sides having a fight, as opposed to, one side just beating the tar out of the other side and not really sort of talking about, well, why would the other side want to hit back? Does that make sense? Like, I agree with you, that's missing.
It's interesting to hear the Bill Maher comments. I mean, this guy. And here is, we thought, everybody think of how, left and has a left side, and he comes up not as a very degrading for the Palestinians, but also degrading for women. And here is this is happening, about a serious tragedy for millions. 2 million people have been trapped for years.
Yeah.
And he's making belittle it and making fun of it. That's the attitude we have.
And the president has stood by the remarks of Prime Minister Netanyahu, who literally the week, after these kids were kidnapped and then disappeared and we now know were killed, Electronic Intifada published a story last week where they showed that actually Prime Minister Netanyahu knew that these kids were dead very early on. Yeah. And instead he used this as a pretext for launching this, aerial assault on Gaza, for rounding up all these activists in the West Bank, for cracking down all these protests, which led to beating up of children, and so he used all of that as a pretext, meanwhile used all this incredibly hateful and racist language, which led to basic lynchings of Palestinians on the streets of the West Bank. And the president, is someone who really tries to talk about the history of racism in this country and the history of, the importance of looking at what your rhetoric is. And yet he has stood by his buddy Netanyahu as he's used those same tactics that have been used for hundreds of years in the United States to justify the lynching of African Americans and the segregation of African Americans. And to me, he passed up a great opportunity to say, no, segregation and apartheid is always wrong. And we know that because of the work he did in college around apartheid, that, President Obama has the ability to see apartheid if he chose to look at it. And
I don't know if even he has the freedom to do it. It seems like once you are trapped in that office, you have nowhere to go except one liner of supporting the Israelis. I mean, you're talking about a huge, powerful lobby, Zionist lobby in this country. And I don't know when this country is going to free itself from the pro-Israeli support. It seems like we're trapped.
Well, I think there's two lines of thinking. Some people would argue that it's sort of the wag the dog question. Is Israel the dog or is Israel the tail? And I guess the argument that I would put forward is that when I went to Palestine, I went to the West Bank, Gaza, and Israel in 2002. And when I was there, it definitely looked like Israel was the 51st state. In my opinion, the United States has decided to carve out this space and to really invest in it because the United States' wars that it's had in Iraq, its efforts for sort of regional, control wouldn't be possible if it didn't have its best friend Israel to be able to sort of use as its basis for operations.
Yeah, that's
and
interesting.
So I really think that part of it, the president understands that his agenda for the Middle East is not possible unless he's got Israel with him.
I think you're right. I think for now Israel is useful for whatever military complex. It seems like some people will argue that what the Israelis doing in Gaza every 4 years, or if you use it, or in Lebanon every 4 or 5 years, they go and test new weaponry because Israel export probably 80% of their military hardware to the other world, and this is like a trade show.
It is, and the fact is that we, one of the issues that the Anti-War Committee also works around is the issue of drones. And Israel has really championed and led the technological developments in the use of drone warfare. And
been using it.
They have. I mean, people in Gaza have been the front lines of basically the guinea pigs for drone warfare for years. And then Israel has used that. Look at what we can do with drones. Look at how we can control this population. Look at how we can terrorize this population. And then that they have used that to export that technology, including to the United States.
Even they use in their brochures and literatures, looking at our accuracy and all this weaponry in Palestine. But tell us a little bit about your organization. Who are those people, and what goes there, and what kind of the people who actually show up in those rally?
Well, what's been interesting is that historically the peace movement in Minnesota has been very old. I'm young in the peace movement. A lot of people in the peace movement are white and are people who have been protesting since the 60s. And it's something we've been really working for is to try to diversify the anti-war movement. What's been really striking about the protests that have been happening the past 2 weeks in solidarity with Gaza has been that the average person at these protests is under the age of 30. The average person at these protests has been Muslim, and the average person at this protest has not been white. I would say the protests we had had last week on Friday was somewhere between 1,500 to 2,000 people. It was on the border of northeast Minneapolis and Columbia Heights. And I would say 4/5 of the people who were there were Arab and Muslim. And so it's been, and the majority of the people who are there are also very young, and so these, I've been doing Palestine solidarity work for about almost 20 years, and I haven't seen any protests like this in Minnesota, and I think that we've had a real jump in terms of that the community is incredibly frustrated and incredibly angered and really wants there to be a change in U.S. foreign policy, and it's taken a great deal of agency of putting themselves out there, even as your previous interviewers talking about, this is Ramadan. We're talking about protests where these people are out protesting in the heat for hours, chanting their hearts out when they can't drink any water and they haven't had any food since sunup. And to be honest, the people who aren't Muslim are, we are like, wow, we are tired, we are hungry, we are thirsty. But the people we're protesting with are like, no, these are our family members, these are our friends. They have an incredible amount of passion to be able to keep going. And then at the end of the protest, they're like, when's the next one? Because they really want to turn, this around. And I think it has really inspired the peace movement here in the Twin Cities to be like, look, we have the ability to try to build something that's got momentum to try to turn this issue around.
Well, Martha, thank you so much. And thank you for coming, and good luck with
pleasure.
your protest. And I think it is a very commendable of you that you are doing this and traveling, and not a lot of Americans doing this. We appreciate that, and we need to hear about your organization. And that's conclude our show. We'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum, and God bless you all.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on, just sit there for a second. And Ahmed, I want you to say goodbye.
The show was an accident.
Okay, take 3. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Welcome to the weekly program. This is going to be interesting.
Take 5.
Okay.
Okay.
Hold on.
In 5, 4, 3.
Welcome. Are we 3 or 1?
20.
Okay. I just started. You are on. I'll edit it out, right?